If you're a voice actor with limited time to give to your business, either because you have a day job that requires your time or you're simply so busy that you need your time, one solution for getting things done is outsourcing. My guest today started outsourcing several years ago and has used the practice to scale up his business. His clients include Google, Discovery, and LG. Very impressive client list, by the way. Welcome to the show, Bryson Carr.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
When we did a coaching session, I was trying to look back through my notes. I think it was 2020 maybe when we did a session together for the first time.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Did you ever think that you would be the guy that would be coming on the show to be the expert on outsourcing?
No, I did not. It's so funny. I was thinking about this earlier, and my mind is this horrible, weird mix of the world's biggest imposter syndrome, and then the next day it's the world's most confident human. Somehow it like bends physics for this to exist in one person. So no, this is I'm thrilled. It's fun, and
you're like the guy now because I've actually given your name to a couple other people. I'm like, look, if you want to know how to outsource, talk to this guy. This guy,
Marc, if you stick with me, you might go places. I'm just saying.
There might be hope for me for this show yet. That's it.
No,
all right.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Before we get into the outsourcing thing, because we are going to go there, I need to know, and this might actually set the tone for the rest of the interview. What kind of maniac willingly jumps out of an airplane?
So I was thinking about this. I really was. I was thinking before our interview, about this whole thing because it's good to check in and kind of ponder some stuff. And I realized, and this is not contrived. This is I sort of realized this on the fly. There are a number of noteworthy sort of connections to that. And I get too nebulous too quickly, but the short answer to your question is because I can, right? I live, and this is a big disclaimer, I'm a horrible example for everything. So all this is going to make no sense. It's going to be a mess, but 200 years ago, the richest person in the world could not do this thing and experience this thing that I can do, not being rich. And for me, and this is again, don't do what I do, you know what I mean? But you're not supposed to want to jump out of planes. I tell people you're doing it correctly if you don't want to do this.
I love to fly. I just prefer to stay in the plane.
Good on you. And you're supposed to. This is the right way to do that. However, for people who are that need this other thing, it's, it's a lot of fun and it gives me a thing that I need, but on a more serious and pertinent level, and I mean this sincerely, it gives me a thing that I need that was missing beforehand. I know that's kind of a strange thing to say, but it's true. And what I mean is, it's sort of from a mental health perspective. I've had depression my whole life. It's always been a thing, and nothing sorts that out chemically in my brain like jumping out of an airplane. I know that's strange. But it's true. I was going to say, I'm not going to attempt to understand it, but I'm going to trust it. Nor should you. But to get very weird way too early, I want to lose all your audience. That's my goal, right? We're going to lose everybody, right? But, I think in some aspect, we've sort of out-evolved ourselves in the first world. No one has the level of depression in the third world the way they do in the first world, right? And part of that, I believe, has to do with the proximity to real life danger. I think there's some kind of correlation. I think our brains are more wired to have 1 in 5 of us get trampled by a mammoth every hunting season, right? And I think that, speaking only for myself, I am never as calm, as clear, as healthy and happy just being a person as I am when I'm on the regular jumping out of airplanes. And it has to do with that. I'm too lazy to meditate, right? And I'm not good at that kind of thing. But
I'm not good either. I always fall asleep. So
I have some good news and some bad news, but there's a fix here, but you're not going to like it now. So really quickly, when you are in free fall and you're having to make decisions in that place where, and you need a real life dangerous situation for your brain to do this. And speaking again, just for myself, you can't fake the danger. Danger's got to be real. But in that space, when you are making life decisions in that place where you're absolutely in the present, as you are, if you're in the present when you're meditating, right? Your brain does a thing that has benefits for the next little while on the ground. It gets the cobwebs out. I am just sharper. I'm clearer. The things that I'm worried about, I'm not worried about. And my brain just gets the chemical thing that it needs, right, to do what it needs to do. And so the healthiest I ever am from a mental place is when I'm jumping on the regular. So it's really an advanced, weird form of therapy for me. And go ahead.
I think it's only fair to point out, the guy who's standing here questioning your decision to jump out of an airplane for 17 years I was on the fire department, and
Really?
I literally just had this conversation with my daughter on the weekend, and she was asking me about, did you ever drive the truck? And I was like, yeah, I drove the truck a lot. I said, if there was ever a house fire, I always sat in the first seat behind the driver. And she said, well, why was that? And I said, because the first seat behind the driver was the first guy in the door on the fire. And I always wanted to be the first guy in the door on every single call. And she's like, what was wrong with you? I'm like, nothing.
Nothing. I want to do this.
I mean, it's
what
really hard for me to call you out and be like, why are you jumping out of airplanes when I was running into burning buildings intentionally and probably getting the same.
Well, this is a judgment-free area. So I appreciate, we've got our ways of doing what we need to do, right? And so
that's right.
Yeah, that happens to work. The short answer is I'm too lazy to meditate. That would have been the easier thing on your listeners.
It wouldn't have been as good of a story.
Fair enough. But
we want to tell a good story.
Fair enough. And you know what? I was thinking, though, there is some legit tie-in to the VO world for me. And I realize, and I'll try to be concise. You have full permission to shut me up and hard rap me whenever you want. But what we're really talking about is fear, right?
Yep.
And I realize over the years, jumping has been a means by which for me to get fear. Fear is the drug for me, right? And I tell people that fear is like the roommate you're always going to have. You can't kill it, but what you can do is get to know it as well as you can, so that when real life fear happens, you can say, okay, this is just fear. And I know fear very well, so that you can drive your decisions and not the fear driving your decisions. And so the trick is to find as many ways to experience fear as you can, so that you stay familiar with that roommate that you have, right? And when you're leaving a secure, predictable job path to do a thing that you want to do, like voiceover, that's a scary thing.
Yeah.
We all know how, it's that just feels wrong, right? We're leaving all the security and this comfort, and that's its own way of having fear. That's the healthy kind, that where you grow and you're not comfortable. You're doing it despite being scared. And that is pertinent, in my opinion, to VO.
I think the other thing that I'm thinking, maybe it's a little bit more simplistic, but I'm like, honestly, if you can jump out of an airplane and be all right, then all of a sudden that Source Connect directed session with 6 clients listening on the other end, or trying to figure out what you're going to post on social media this week without humiliating yourself or whatever, all of a sudden, those things don't seem so bad, right?
That's fair.
It creates an element of perspective as well. If this is what you've been fearing, just go jump out of an airplane, and then all this other stuff is going to be so
right?
easy.
There it is. Everybody wins, right? You get it. It's so funny. There's another sort of thing that I realize I use in the VO world, and that is when you're getting your license. And by the way, it's actually decision making when you're in that place, when you're in the presence, having to not just close your eyes and freak out, having to be there and say, okay, do a thing, have a thought, right?
Yep.
And with, so when you're getting your license, they teach you have 2 jars. When you start out, one is your luck jar, one is your experience jar. And your luck jar is full, your experience jar is empty. And the whole idea is, by the time your luck jar is empty, you better have a full experience jar, right? And so
valid.
We like that, yeah. And so with me and my own personal VO journey, I am operating under the presumption that I have used up every bit of luck I will ever get in the way I got into this. It's so random and bananas and crazy. And I'm assuming I gave an Uber ride to the guy, and weird things happen, and here I am. There's a much longer version, but out of love for you guys, I will not put you through it. But yeah, the guy was like, come audition for me. I don't even do this. Yeah, come audition. Okay, I did, and it went well, and now it's, here we are, right? And I am operating under the assumption that that's all the luck I'm ever going to have, and it's on me to do all the hard work from here on out. And I will happily take more luck. My ego's not invested, and I'm doing this all by my own merits. I'll happily take more luck, but I'm assuming no more is coming, and now it's on me to do the rest of it. So that's kind of a tie-in with VO. That's the best I got with jumping.
No, it actually, when you lay it out like that, it actually makes sense. And now I think, that everybody listening is going to be inquiring about, going for a skydive for their birthday, or, as a reward for their big booking or whatever, so they can experience that on a whole new level. Now, I mean, you're here to talk about outsourcing because I think that it's one of those things that I think every single voice actor could and should probably do in some capacity, but it's something we often don't think about. You've been doing it from the very beginning. You were very early on in embracing outsourcing. So full-time or part-time voiceover
Full
when
time.
you started doing it?
Oh, I apologize. Hello, this is me even without caffeine. Sorry, man. My brain goes way too. When I started, I was doing part-time.
Okay.
And that ties in. Oh, sorry, man. I keep on hijacking your questions, man. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's the question. Like full-time or part-time. So you were part-time in the beginning, because I think that's the other assumption, right? We make assumptions that we need to be full-time in order to be able to hire somebody or to justify hiring somebody. But you actually used this as a tool early on, really to help get you where you wanted to be. Is that fair?
It is. I was thinking a lot about this before our interview, and one of sort of the, I don't know, I guess principles, ideas that I find myself thinking a lot about is, and again, this is all my opinion. That's all it is. However, and I'd love to hear yours on this, but to be successful in this from the start, I believe that you need a combination of some degree of money, a degree of time, and a degree of energy, right?
Yep, that's fair.
And there's more to it than that, but that's my dumbed down version, right? So and it's all about, I tell people, it's all about finding out what kind of cards you are holding. Take an honest look at your situation and look at what your cards are. Now, for me, my cards were, at the time I had a so-called normal job that took up a lot of time and a lot of energy, right? I had not a lot, I had more money than I had time and reserve energy. So that's my cards. Those are my cards, right?
Yep.
And so with this, alternatively, suppose you didn't have another job. Well, you've got less time, and you got more time and less money and more energy. So your MO might be doing a lot of this yourself, but it's all about your situation. Now, my cards were more money, less time, less energy. Now, how do I make this work? Now, for me, I took your marketing class. This is an unsolicited plug for Marc's marketing. He'll pay me later, but yeah, no, I took that and it was very good. And it walked me through a lot of using Upwork to make some of this happen. And what I did, my situation grew very organically due to a fair amount of trial and error. What I did was I started out, I posted a job. The job was literally, this entire job was, I need 15 leads. That was the job. Very simple. And I had 5 people try it. And, paid 5 people to do it. The best one out of those, I said, okay, let's look at this together. Now I want to hire you to do 15 more. And I said, let's look at your list. This is great because of this. This is not so great because of this. This needs that. This needs that, right? Now, taking this, get me 15 more. Paid him again. And now I had 15 more. Now we repeated this until he knew exactly what I needed and could replicate and do it. And now I said, go get me 100.
Yep.
Right. And so that slowly built to it being the way it is now. And nowadays, and I feel bad. I used to say, well, this runs itself. And that's a terrible way for me to say that. It doesn't run itself. My awesome assistant, Pathic, does all this amazing stuff for me.
Yep.
And now he researches leads. He sends emails that are templated emails that you gave me. And he sends them out that come from my email address, 100 a week, along with about 80 or so follow-ups that go out every week. And he handles that for me. And that means it's great because in my life, if I'm busy with other things, then no matter what happens, this goes out. And part of it's knowing yourself. I don't have quite the level of discipline to do that on my own. I'd like to, but that's the way it is, right? Knowing my weak spots, and that's part of it. But now he runs my CRM. I depend on him and I trust him and I rely on him so much, and we're good friends now. And so it's just gradually grown. And now he runs a lot of it for me and a lot of decision-making things. We've really built this great relationship, all starting from, hey, get me 15 leads.
I think that's one of the most important parts. For me, it was the thing that I figured out very early, thankfully. And I think it's where a lot of voice actors get it wrong. They don't post a job for 15 leads. They post a job for 100 leads or for 500 leads. And they don't realize until they've got the full list that the training wasn't quite right.
Sure.
Right. And so now you've got 500 leads and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? And you're upset with the virtual assistant, but is it really the virtual assistant's fault, or is it because you didn't give them good information or whatever? So I really like this idea of start with 15, figure out what's working, what's not working, what's good, what's bad. What do we have to do to course correct? different job titles, different search terms, whatever, go do another 15 and just kind of build it up from there. And I think that's really smart. I think this whole concept of the cards of what is time, money, and energy.
Those are what
I feel like there's a class in there somewhere. So just letting you know that you could probably teach a workshop on that at a conference or something.
Well, I value
because
your
I think
opinion,
it's actually
so
a really
thank you.
brilliant way of looking at it.
Thanks.
Right? That's where scale comes from ultimately, right? If you don't have time, then you have to find a way to get somebody else to give you some of their time, right? It's the whole argument that Bezos and Elon Musk have the same 24 hours a day that we do, but they're multi-billionaires, right?
Exactly.
Like, what have they figured out? They've figured out scale, right?
That's fair. I'd like to make my mistakes on a smaller level. And mistakes are fine. That's the whole
thing.
Let's
make some $100 mistakes before we make $1 billion mistakes.
Right?
I think, right? I don't want to go out and buy Twitter tomorrow. You know, that may not work out so well, but
you know that you never until you try, right? I'm not one to shoot down ideas, but you know, another piece to that I thought about is it's also being honest with oneself about some unpleasant things. Like me telling myself, I would love it if I had the discipline to sit down and crank out these many leads by myself. I don't. And it's not a fun reality to look at, but that's the way it is, right? And my goal is to succeed in this. And here are my obstacles. I want to have an honest look at what my obstacles are, including my own sort of limitations. And that's one of them. So thankfully, this is a workaround for that.
Yeah. I mean, the other side of that too, and the point that I make with people is there are certain things that only you can do in your business, right? Nobody else is going to record your auditions for you. Nobody else is going to manage agent relationships for you. Nobody else is going to record the bookings for you. Like there's certain things that only you can do. And all of the rest of that stuff that's left over that has to get done is something that could potentially be done by somebody else. And that's not a statement to the individual and how hard you're willing to work or how smart you are or whatever. Actually, recognizing and being willing to get rid of some of those things is a statement to how smart you are and how entrepreneurial you are, because you're realizing there's only so much I can do. There's only so much I should do. There's only so much I have to do. Let's get somebody else to do all the other stuff.
I would agree. I would even add that for some people, ego plays a role in that.
Sure.
You know, and that's not everyone, of course, but it's also, realizing, it's fine not to be able to do all this yourself. Get past that. It's the way it is. You can stroke your ego and struggle, or you can do a workaround, set that aside, and make more progress faster, in my humble opinion.
Yep. I remember having a conversation with you at one point, and I'm paraphrasing, so tell me if I got this wrong, but the impression that I got from you was that you were literally like, I want to outsource all the things. Like, let me be in the booth, let me do the recording, and then I just don't want to have to do anything else if I don't have to do anything else. And I respected that. I respected that mentality, because I was like, crap, I wish I could develop that mentality, because sometimes I think that I do spend too much time doing things that I don't necessarily have to do. And maybe it's because I enjoy them. Mostly it's because I have trust issues, I think. And I feel like I can.
And you take your business seriously, right? It's not easy to hand that off to somebody. Right. So that's another piece to it.
I loved that idea of just give it all away. So you mentioned you're working with this one guy that you've been working with for a while. Has it always been one virtual assistant? Have you brought in other people, like one-off projects, or test drove other people for different things? Or what does that look like for you?
It's a combination. It's luck surely has a large piece in this, but the same guy that I did that in February of 2020, before we knew the world was about to end in a month, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same guy. This all started from this tiny little job for 15 leads. And now, I love the guy. He knows my life. He's a little segue. I have a bird, I have a pigeon, because that's normal, right? But he's seen my bird. I've seen his daughter, right? I mean,
yep.
So part of it's just been luck. Now, had I not been lucky, I would have just continued doing the small scale trial and error till I had someone that did have more promise and it did work, and I would use it until it didn't work. I would continue a path until it didn't work, and then I would do a different one. But luckily, I didn't have to do that. But to address another piece of what you're talking about, I wish, there's no regret in this, but you're always learning as you go. And looking back at what you did originally, how would you do it differently, right? What I would have done, what I would have done is I would have done the exact same thing that I did with Pathik, my assistant. but I would have said, okay, your states are these 4 states. I'm going to build this. I'm going to train you. I'm going to do all these things and get it to where he just handles it. He's on it. Right.
Yep.
And then, when that's done, I will do 4 more states. And the key is, as long as the return I'm getting is a good bit higher than my expense, there's no reason not to do this as many times as I can.
Yep.
Right. So I could be theoretically making 10 times the money, having 10 assistants doing the same thing and just cut the whole country up that way. I'm sure there are flaws with this idea, but I mean, there's a foundation for scaling this up, but I've sort of saturated. At this point, I would double up on people that we've already looked at, but
right.
The power of exponentially growing that is that's the thing that I found myself thinking about lately. So that's for those starting out, that might be a way that you might want to do that, but you might have a different opinion.
There's a return on investment equation that I think absolutely calculates into that, right? I mean, if you sit down, and the easiest way to figure it out is, I'm going to get the numbers wrong because I'm spitballing here, but let's say you're a 6-figure voice actor, right? Let's say you've built $100,000 a year business and you're working 40 hours a week doing it. So you're making approximately $50 an hour, right? So in theory, your time is worth about $50 an hour. So if you can find somebody who's working for you for $10 or $15 or $20 an hour and is doing a bunch of stuff that you can't do, freeing you up to have more $50 an hour time, then you're in profit. Like, that's a profitable investment. And it's really important that you look at it that way, because a lot of people say no because they look at the upfront cost.
Fair.
Right? It's going to cost me $100 out of my pocket up front or $500 out of my pocket up front, but you're not looking at the return on investment potential on the other side of that, because how much time you gained back to, again, do the thing that only you can do. And so I love that you look at it that way. And I think that's the way that everybody should look at it. And I also think that there is at least a level of logic in that thinking that I, could repeat this infinity and scale up. Like, look, that's what Amazon did,
yacht,
right? Like that's right. Like that's how this works. I mean, eventually you're going to run out of available recording time, but why couldn't you get to a point?
What a luxury to have, right?
Yeah, I mean, right. That worst case scenario is I've got, 6 editors working for me full time, and I'm just, in a recliner in the booth, sitting back with a Dr. Pepper, just recording for 8 hours a day.
You get it. Yeah.
Cashing checks and then doing my thing or whatever. Right. Like, yeah, that'd be so terrible. And it's, we're laughing about it. I mean, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, you can see, like, we're laughing about it, but why couldn't you, in theory, if you were willing to take the risk and make the investment and find the right people to work for you, why couldn't you, in theory, make that happen? I mean, I think you could.
And then I heard this thing the other day, a buddy of mine, Dave, I wish I was this entrepreneurial, but he's brilliant with this kind of stuff. But he said something along the lines of, if your first release of whatever it is, right, your first release, if it needs no changes, then you waited too long to put it out. Yep. And there's something to be said for another thing my father-in-law says that I love is make a decision even if it's wrong. And so I tend to err on the side of analysis paralysis. Mm-hmm. So that's my struggle, but that's what I'm working on. However, we talked about the theoretical possibilities of this model, right?
Yep.
The way I would think that would play out in the real world would be, it seems like it would work. Let's try it out, see what happens. And when problems arise, guess what? We solve those problems and course correct and we, whatever. But trying that model out and then seeing what problems arise, great. Let there be problems. Then we'll solve them. And then we just repeat until we die. Right. And so, yeah.
You've talked about what an amazing relationship you have with your assistant now and the level of trust that is there and his ability to handle all of the things. In theory, you get 5 more just like him doing the exact same thing that he's doing. And now, is it going to happen without hiccups or, road, bumps in the road along the way or whatever? No, not necessarily. But the logic of it still makes sense. So let's talk about, because what I'm really hoping, and I believe is going to happen from this conversation, it's going to get more people thinking about the idea of the virtual assistant, the concept of the virtual assistant. I want you to talk a little bit about your hiring process. Now, I know you talked about, I hired him for 15 and then, this is good. Go do 15 or whatever. What sort of things were you looking for to get to that point? Is it the information that you gave up front? Were you looking for a certain kind of person? Is it, I want you to have or need you to have these particular tools, or what are some of the things that we can be looking for to help us get a good assistant or a better assistant out of the gate when we're hiring?
That I love that question. My thought on that is I would have to, part of it is coming to an appreciation of the things you can teach and the things that you cannot, right? Do they have the things that I cannot teach, right? Another way to look at this is, and this gets in a weird sort of psychological tangent, but people do things that are not good, quote unquote, right? Because they don't know or they don't care, right? And so once you get rid of the don't know variable, if they keep doing it, it's because they don't care.
Yep.
You can help somebody who doesn't know. You cannot help someone who doesn't care.
So true.
So really, on a fundamental level, I'm looking for someone who cares, right? And has a basic level of maturity in terms of fidelity, like doing what they say they're going to do. And the time, those are all sort of, I wasn't doing all this consciously, right? But I realized looking back, that's what I was doing, right? Do they have these basic competency things that I need them to have so that I can then invest the time in them to teach them the things that I need them to know, right? I can't make you care. I can't make you do a good job. I can't make you be timely. Those are things you either care about or you don't. So finding someone who does care and someone who is capable of, has a basic level of competency of understanding the nuances of what I need. And ideally someone who is, in my opinion, that enough would work. But where I struck gold with Pathik is he also has an inclination to, he cares a lot. He will enterprise and bring new ideas to me that are unsolicited. You know, he cares to the degree that
he's competent in your business now. He's not just a VA at this point. Like
correct.
He's on the
I
team.
love him. I love him. You know what I'm saying? He told me a few nights ago, we had a meeting and I legit teared up, man. I really did. Part of this is because I waited so many tables in my life. I mean, you know, I think everybody should have a license to eat out at a restaurant. The way you get the license is you are a server for a year, but that will make you care, right? I mean, when your livelihood is depending on someone's generosity, then you wouldn't, you know, I would never want to see him as, so anyway, this is my mind, dude. It goes everywhere. I apologize.
It's all right.
But he told me, he said, out of the people that I work for, you're the only one who treats me like a friend.
Nice.
You know, and I'm emotion walking anyway. Right. But, that I legit, you know, hey man, that's the best thing you can be told. And it kind of broke my heart that what horrible stuff is everyone else doing to him. Right.
Yeah, it's totally commoditized, right?
God, it's so, you know, I'm kind of getting away from your question, but
it makes sense.
Do they care?
I would rather be with somebody that I would rather have somebody on my team that wants to be on my team and that I can build a relationship with, right? Think about it from the voiceover perspective. What are we looking for as voice actors to build our business? Are we looking for a bunch of one-off clients who are going to hire us one time and we're never going to deal with them again? Or are we looking for clients that we're going to work with for a decade, that are always going to be there, that are going to come back, that we're going to get to know them, they're going to get to know us, right? So if it stands to reason that I think for most of us anyway, that's what we're looking for in our voiceover business. It's not so out of the question to think if I'm hiring somebody, I want to look for that same kind of thing. If I'm going to have somebody that's going to come and work for me, I've been working with the same guy for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years at this point now. Like, it's nice to have that. It's nice to know that you've got somebody that you can just go to, that you can trust, that's going to get the job done.
You know, and that ties into a bigger thing that I find valuable. And this, you know, this goes back to, I know I haven't shared this story, but the way I got sort of my boost back into VO, because I gave an Uber ride to the right guy, there's several things. And people ask me that because it's such a random, when people move to LA to do this kind of stuff, I'm just some guy jumping out of airplanes and driving for Uber. You know, that was what I was doing. And I picked up a guy and he's blind and we were running a bunch of errands together. Right. And I wanted to help, but I didn't want to be insulting. I didn't quite know where that line is. I don't know. And so I was basically like, hey, you know, do you want me to roll with or whatever? And he was, no, we're good. We became friends. Right. And I said, so what do you do? And he said, I have a production company. I need a new voiceover guy. And I said, I do VO, which I did one local commercial 10 years earlier in Birmingham, Alabama for hepatitis C. That was my, you know, I do VO.
Credit.
He didn't ask how long. No, but so part of that is it's not complicated, but it makes such a difference. It's just be nice, man. It doesn't take any skill or any discipline. Just don't be a jerk, man. You never know who's going to, and not even because it can help you, right? It's just a good way to live. And I'm by no means am I infallible, by the way. But, had it just been some guy trying to get, a ride done, I wouldn't have been like that. And I'm hardly a good example, by the way. But, part of it's, don't be a jerk. Be nice to everybody. I mean, don't be weak. That's an important distinction. But be nice and think, why not me, right? I had no business volunteering myself, but boom, 60 TV and film credits later, right? I mean, it all came from being nice and thinking, why not me? And just helping a guy out to be a decent human.
Yeah.
And again, I'm off topic for the question you wanted to go
this
into,
is all part of the journey, right? And part of this is just getting to understand voice actors and understanding their stories too. So I want you to talk about, in the beginning, you hired him, it sounds like it was a project to project basis, right? Get 15 more, get 15 more. How many hours a week on average were you using your virtual assistant in the beginning when you were still, you had a day job, you're doing voiceover part-time? How has that evolved over the years? How many hours now?
That is a great question, because I didn't do it that way. I looked at it, right now, starting out, this one job is to get me 15 leads.
Yep.
I want them to be of a certain quality. However you do it is up to you. I don't want to micromanage you. You know how to do this. I don't. I trust you. I need 15 leads. In exchange, you'll get X, right? And so for Pathic and me, it's always been what the job is. And I trust him to handle it however the best way it is for him. So I don't know how many hours it takes. We've never really talked about that. It's more about, as the job itself has gotten larger, I've paid him more because it's a bigger job. It's a bigger task to achieve, going from 15 leads to 100 leads, 100 intros, 80 or so, doing my CRM, the follow-ups, all those things. As the tasks themselves have gotten bigger, the pay has gotten bigger. But I don't know. And if I'm honest, I don't really care how much. I don't want him to overwork himself, right? But we don't really talk about it in terms of hours. We talk about it in terms of the job is X. That's the job.
Okay.
It doesn't matter how long it takes you. If you do it in 15 minutes, great. If these are the gold you're giving me, I hope it took you less time. So we don't do it by hour.
When did you get to a point where, because you mentioned that he's sending emails for you now, putting stuff into your CRM, those are two big things for most of us, myself included, where I'm almost breaking out in hives thinking about the idea of somebody having access to my inbox or somebody having access to my CRM. When did you get to a point where you're like, I could trust this guy with this stuff? And were there any steps that you took to protect yourself in the event that maybe it didn't go as you thought it would or hoped it would?
Sure. That's a great question. I never had any sort of these official checkpoints, these micro epiphanies that were, whatever. It was more just a slow, organic, like any real good relationship. It was just, it evolved as it evolved. And as soon as I thought that, hey, this is a thing I think he could handle, let's talk about it. And I didn't just drop it on. I said, hey, tell me your thoughts about it. I did as much listening as I did talking with him, and what are your thoughts on this? Do you want to do this? Do you think you could handle that? I trust you if you want to give us a shot. And we gave it a shot. And I made a point to be like, look, if you realize this dimension of it is not for you, that's okay. I just want to know the real look at how you're doing, what you feel about it. Is it working? Is it not? Do you want to do it? Right. So we had a conversation, and anytime there was a new element to it, we just kind of talked about it like a couple of humans. And I just said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. Do you want to do it? And can you do it? Let's give it a shot. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to this. Well, there's no pressure. And so it was slow, it was organic. And again, part of it was luck. I just had a great person, but had I not been lucky, I would have just kept doing this until I found one.
Until you found the right one.
Part of it's out of my control and part of it's in my control.
Talk about the communication process. Is this email? Like, I know you said you worked on Upwork. They've got a messaging system on Upwork. Do you Zoom calls?
How do you
communicate?
There's no real reason we didn't use Upwork. We just happened to use email more.
Okay.
But yeah, we email a lot, and a lot of the email, once we're on the same page and we just go forth and conquer, right? We don't email that much apart from, hey, Pathic, prospects, please send. Okay. Dead, please send. Right. But whenever there's a change or he has an idea, all he has to do is we've created a dynamic of equality, and he knows I'm available to him. If he wants to have a call, great, man, let's have a call, right? He probably has a great idea that I never would have thought about. So to answer your question, sorry, man, mostly it's email, but every now and then we'll get together and we'll kind of sync our watches, check how he's doing. And then what else can we add? What else do you want to add? And he's had ideas that I never would have had.
That's awesome.
So it's, oh man, it's great. So part of it's just appreciating the guy, and
when you get the right person, giving them the freedom and flexibility to do what they do, just like we would hope a client would give us a little bit of leash to, do what we do in direction, or, approaching a script in a certain way or something. Trust the expert to do what they're an expert at. Right.
And I thought about, the good and bad managers I've had in my life, and what I hated about the bad ones, and what would I want, how would I want to be managed? Right. Mm-hmm. A, I wouldn't want to be talked down to, and B, I wouldn't want to be, whatever, you get it. I mean, I don't talk to him like he's a child. He's earned my trust. He knows what he's doing. He's better than me than a lot of this stuff. And part of this is, again, luckily, this isn't a merit thing, but luckily I have a secure enough ego to be like, hey man, I don't know. I have no idea. Yep. You tell me, right? There's so much I don't know. It's like, he adds a lot. So that's why I name drop him so much. He's really good, and I'm grateful for him.
Everybody's going to be looking him up now.
I know, right? Just kidding. His name's Jeff or something. Yeah.
I love having a conversation like this though, because I think part of the whole mentality of a VOpreneur is seeing yourself as a business, right? And not just seeing yourself as a single solitary entity going into the booth and recording and coming out of the booth and being done. And so when you look at yourself as a business and you start to think like a business owner, it opens you up to the possibilities of how you might be able to expand or grow your business. And sometimes we don't always think that way, or we have fear about thinking that way, or we make assumptions. I'm not a big enough, I'm not big. My voiceover business isn't big enough yet. I don't really shouldn't have a virtual assistant, or don't need a virtual assistant. And so it's really great to hear a story of somebody who's gone through this evolution from part-time to full-time. And I think it's fair to say, crediting your virtual assistant on that journey, like just the amount of work that he's been able to do for you to help you to get to that point. So there are people that are listening right now who are on the fence. They've thought about it, but they haven't gone for it, or they've questioned whether or not it's worth it, or they've questioned whether or not they're worth it, or their business is worth it to have a virtual assistant to do some things. As somebody who's gone through that transition and come from this part-time business to a very successful full-time career using a virtual assistant to do it, what advice do you have for that person that's on the fence that might get them off the fence?
I love that question. I would say two things. One, and I think about this all the time. If I'm really honest, I'm proud that it's a way of looking at it that I sort of came up with that I find helps me. Maybe it will help some other people, and this applies to everything, by the way. Any task from making a sandwich to becoming president is just a series of steps. Just do the one next step. You can't do all these other things. It's daunting. Just find out what is my single next step and go do that thing. Now, if you're in that place and you're intimidated by the hugeness of doing a virtual assistant or whatever, guess what? You don't have to do that. All you have to do, if you want to do it, get on Upwork and see if there are people who will get 15 leads for you. You don't have to get a virtual, just go get someone to get you 15 leads. If you like what they did, get them to get you 15 more. Yep. This isn't a thing you're committed to. You're not buying a house. You know what I mean? So yeah, if that's too big, fine. Go do an ad for 15 leads. That's easy. Go do that. If you hate it, don't ever do it again.
That's a very valid
But if it turns
take.
into 30, turn it into 100, and then turn it into a yacht one day, right?
Yeah. We're not proposing marriage here, right? We're hiring a stranger off of the internet to find some leads, and maybe one day they become a team member and a friend. But if you're lucky and you put in and you respect the input of the machine, right? Yeah. I mean, you don't want to go cheap on the things that they need as a person too, both monetarily. I mean, monetarily in that I make a point to make sure that he's making above what the market is, but in a pragmatic way I can still afford, right? Yep. But he's happy and he's treated like a human. So, respect the input of that relationship, like any checking account analogy, right? Yep. Are you in the black? Are you, Yep. But if you're feeling daunted, just go try this out. Go do 15 leads. If you like it, keep doing it.
If you don't, try another thing.
I think that's something everybody listening to this can do is, and it's okay to scale it up over time, right? Like maybe you hire somebody for an hour, or you hire somebody for one project. And when you have proof of concept, then maybe you hire them for 2 hours, and maybe it ultimately grows to 5 hours a week, or, it goes from 15 leads to 100 leads, or they start doing some emails or putting the leads into your CRM or whatever. Like, you can incrementally grow it as you become more comfortable with it, which is the nice thing about it. But I mean, I outsource a lot of different things. More often than not, it's a project to project basis. And every time I do it, I'm like, I'm so glad that I did this. I just wish that I could literally have the trust, which is my own personal issue.
Maybe your business expenses therapy, right? I mean, it goes to wherever it goes, right?
That's
Wherever
right.
we need to get where we need to go. And your one next step might be to work on that.
Because now I've got this vision in my head of me just rolling out of bed in the morning, straight into the booth, just recording whatever's got to be recorded. When it's done, just going back upstairs, doing whatever I want to do. Because I got this whole other army of people.
What is your next step on that thing?
What is my next
find
step?
The one. It could be go get a sandwich if you're hungry, but that is a next step.
That is the next step. Yeah, I probably got to talk to a therapist and find out why I got control issues.
I would say your next step isn't even talk to it. When I get intimidated, it's like, what is your next step might be to pull out your phone. Then the next step is Google therapists, and we're in Canada, right? I mean, if you get intimidated, dial that back to, okay, keep breathing for a while. Now go get my phone out of my pocket, right? And you were mentioning earlier about when to scale up and that kind of thing. And I realize it's this finding a sweet spot between, like, okay, when you take a kid bowling, right? And they have the bumpers on the side that you can pull out so that it doesn't go in the gutter, right? That's Sarah's and my analogy for a lot of things. And when you're trying to find that sweet spot on something, if you don't know where it is, find it where you hit the bumper, right? And that is, I'm doing so little right now at this. I think I've hit a bumper on stagnation. Okay, I need to put the pedal down on my fear a bit and, go be uncomfortable for a bit until I hit the one that I'm way too uncomfortable. Okay, and there's that bumper. And find that sweet spot between lack of comfort and stagnation, right? I mean, I never want to be completely comfortable. And I have this morbid fear of being comfortable, right?
Yep.
But I also obviously don't want to be stagnant.
Then you just go jump out of an airplane again, right?
Well, the problem is, never mind, not going to. The short version is you can do what's called the fear treadmill, meaning you're no longer afraid of this thing, so you got to keep upping the ante, and pretty soon you're wingsuit proximity flying on a mountain, and
you're doing the Red Bull thing that they did a few years ago, where you're literally free falling from outer space or whatever, because now the airplane's not enough of a thrill for you.
Indeed, and that happened to me, but that's another story for another podcast. But back to what you can edit that part out, right? We'll look the same so that we're no. But for me, it's finding that balance between am I too comfortable or am I too scared? Right. And where is that spot of, I need to be stimulated enough to not be comfortable because I'm evolving if I'm lucky. Right. And it's brutal because the natural tendency is to go seek comfort. Right. We all do it without even thinking about it. And it happens to me, and it happens, so it's hard, but that ties into your business too. Right. I mean, whatever you're making, if you're happy with that, that's great. If you want to be making more, but you're just stuck in comfort land, then find a fear and find a risk and see what goes with that thing.
At the end of the day, it comes down to this. My unofficial data says that 9 out of 10 voice actors freaking hate marketing. And so that just means that 9 out of 10 voice actors need to find somebody who doesn't hate it to do it for them, because that's the thing that's holding you back. Like, it's really, it boils down that easily. It's. And
what do you hate more? That's it's like, what do I hate more?
What is causing you more discomfort? Having somebody else do it for you and knowing that you've got to work with someone and trust someone, or having to do it yourself, knowing how much you hate it, or knowing that you have to do it, but just not doing it at all. And so staying stuck.
Well, what fear stinks the least? And go do that thing, right? Because I know you have a hard, I get it. We all have a hard time trusting a person. What the downside of that avenue is the trust thing, but the downside of not doing it is this thing. And what do you hate the most?
Yep.
Right. And so there it is.
Man, this has been awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bryson. I
enjoy this, man. Thank you so much. This means a lot to me.
It's so nice to be able to talk to just a working pro who's done the thing, who can share some tips and tricks that you've learned along the way, so that hopefully it encourages. I mean, if one person goes and hires a virtual assistant as a result of this interview, and it frees them up to do more of something that they want to do, which could be spending more time in the booth, or maybe it's spending more time with their family, then you know what? The interview was a win, and I'm thrilled, and I'm glad that somebody learned something from the information that we had to share. Now, there's one more thing we got to talk about, though.
Yes, sir.
Before we go, we talked about the fact that you've been able to grow your business to become a very successful voice actor. You've got a very impressive client list on your website, but there's one in particular that's coming up here that is a little bit of a big deal. So I'm assuming that your involvement with the Grammys is not going as Tay-Tay's date. So
you know what's so sad? I don't know who that is.
Taylor Swift.
Oh, okay. I'm not cool enough to know that that's Tay. I can't bench press what dude with the Chiefs can. So
nor would I want to try. So tell us about your involvement in the Grammys, because this is cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so funny, man. My mind is all over the place. Like, I would have completely forgotten that. But there's an adult, thankfully, who can take notes and remind me of these things. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I've never done this. So I do a lot of what's called audio description narration, AD narration. Okay. And basically it's narrating the things that you would see but not hear for the visually impaired. It's a second audio channel on Netflix, HBO, whatever. And you can turn it on. It's your AD, audio description narration. And it's describing things like you wouldn't say a gun fires because you hear a gun firing, right? But you would say they lock eyes, they smile, whatever. And the whole idea is to match the tone, to not take someone out of their immersion for what they're watching, right? And so, the whole art of it comes in matching what's going on, right? And you can't be doing a chase scene the way you do a romance scene. He kisses her. Oh my God, it's really, you can't. So that's part of that whole craft, is doing that. So I've done a lot of it. Okay. And now the next step is doing it live. I'm doing a fair amount of it live these days. I just did the Rose Parade for the second year, had a great time with some great other people. And now I'm doing the Grammys live on ABC on the 4th. And so yeah, it'll be fun. Sarah is the Yoda of this particular realm. She almost has an EGOT. That's kind of the joke. She's done the Tonys, the Oscars, one of the other ones. So she does a lot of this as well. Sarah Ormany is her name. She doesn't need me plugging her, but I'm happy to plug her.
But you're going to.
Really good. I am anyway.
Because you're good, man.
Yeah, and what, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what that is. It's going to be the February, the second month, 4th on ABC. So feel free to check that out.
So we all got to flip our audio channel over to the audio description channel so that we can listen and we'll get to hear you there. Well, that's awesome. I got one more question.
Yes, sir.
If somebody wants to talk about this, somebody wants to talk about outsourcing, somebody needs a little bit more of a nudge or a little bit more encouragement or something like that, is it cool if somebody reaches out to you, and how can we get connected?
You can. Bryson at BrysonCarr.com.
Right on, man. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Bryson. I'm so grateful to you for everything that you've shared, and you have inspired me. I am going to, one of my goals for this year, I got to get an editor for the podcast. And I have tried once or twice in the past and chickened out because I feel like
we've been there.
All right. No, they can't do it as good as me, or they can't do it as fast
as me.
They
can't
do it.
Man. You can't say that.
As efficient as me or whatever. But I got to do it. So this is the year that it's going to happen, and I'm going to draw my inspiration from you. And
you got this.
I'm going to come back and listen to this episode, and I will keep you posted as to when it happens.
All right, man. Thank you. I really enjoyed this. This was so much fun, just getting to hang and pick someone else's brain on this. And, we're all on our little islands in VO, right? And that's why I enjoy places like VO Atlanta, because it's good just to forget, hey, there are more of us out there. And
that's right.
I'm not on an island. There are more of me, right? And so I really appreciate this. It's been a great time. Thank you so much, man.
Remember, I want you to draft the outline of the cards for the presentation so you can pitch it.
I need a snappy title. That's what I need.
Flip it off to J. Michael for Atlanta, or for One Voice in Dallas, and
love some
Val
JMC.
for Mavo, and I'm looking forward to that first workshop. So, that's right. If I got to hire somebody to outsource to do the podcast for me, then it seems only fair that if I got homework, you got to have homework, right?
I'm all about equity, so good on you. I respect that. I'm on it. So we'll have this is our new accountability group. Right?
There you go.
They'll just be in front of a number of people.
Happening live on the podcast. There you go.
There it is. We're upping the stakes. Anyway, all right, man. Thank you, man.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so grateful for the time that you shared and for the wisdom as well. I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Thank you.